Good evening and welcome to the Greenwich Library Learning Lab lecture series. There's a lot of L's there. My name is Carla Sherman. I'm the Assistant Training Librarian at Greenwich Library and I welcome you this evening. Our program tonight is Scam Me If You Can. It's an evening with Frank Abagnale. Before we get started, I just want to let everyone know we are in webinar format, so we cannot see or hear you. We have the chat disabled to minimize disruptions. We do have the Q&A box open on the bottom of your screen, so if you have any questions, please feel free to put those in the Q&A. We do have a pretty busy group of questions tonight with Frank, so we hope to get to your questions at the end. At least something. So please feel free to share your questions. Our colleague Dora Salm is helping out in the background as well with those questions. So first I want to extend a tremendous thank you to the Greenwich Library Board of Trustees for their continued support of our programming. This program tonight would not be possible without them. So a tremendous thank you for your support. So before I introduce Frank to you, I just want to talk a little bit about him. He is the author of Catch Me If You Can, The Art of the Steal, Stealing Your Life, and a number of other books. He is the man behind Steven Spielberg's movie, Catch Me If You Can, starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Tom Hanks. His most recent book is Scam Me If You Can, and I'm going to show you that now. This is the inspiration for our program tonight. The book is available for purchase at Diane's Books in Greenwich. And I will say that I read this book when it first came out. I considered myself pretty savvy as far as how to protect myself. And I'm not exaggerating when I say I was halfway through the first chapter and I realized I needed to go home. I had so much more work I needed to do. There were things I hadn't even thought of. So this book has transformed my life, and I knew I needed to do a program for all of you as well. The book is for everyone. It belongs on your reference shelf. You will always learn from it. It's for teenagers, it's for adults, it's for senior citizens, it's for everyone. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Frank Abagnale. Hi, Frank.
Hi, Carla. It's great to be with you and your audience tonight. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for taking the time from your schedule. I know you do this a lot. I thought it better for our patrons to hear from you rather than me. If you could tell us how you got started at the very young age and how it evolved and where you are now.
Absolutely. Actually, I was raised not far from Greenwich in Bronxville, New York, in Westchester County. As a young man, a young teenager, my parents started having marital problems that affected a lot of my life. And as a young teenager, I started to get into trouble, hoping I'd get my parents back together again. By the time I'd reached the age of 16, my parents decided to get a divorce and I decided to run away from home. Back in the 1960s, a lot of kids ran away from home. Unfortunately, a lot of them got into Haight-Ashbury, the hippie scene, the drug scene. I ended up on the streets in New York, 16 years old, and I realized very quickly I had to be creative to survive. The only asset I had is I looked a lot older than 16. I had a driver's license at 16 from New York, didn't have a photo on it back then, just an IBM card. So I altered one digit of my date of birth. I was actually born in April of 1948, but I dropped the 4, converted it to 3, and that made me 10 years older. I started writing bad checks. As you know, I started impersonating people. And of course, eventually, like every criminal, sooner or later you get caught. I was arrested by the French police when I was 21 years old. I served time in the French prisons. I was later extradited to Sweden. I served time in the Swedish prisons. And I was later brought back to the United States, where a US federal judge convicted me of forgery and sentenced me to 12 years in federal prison. I served 4 of those 12 years at a federal prison in Petersburg, Virginia. When I was 26 years old, as part of my parole from prison, it was agreed that I would help educate and train federal law enforcement agents. I agreed and was released. During that time of 5 years on parole, I did a lot of training of federal agents, but of course, I was not an employee of the FBI. I received no compensation whatsoever. It was just part of my parole. Being on parole was very difficult in the very beginning. I got a job at Pizza Inn to support myself. They made me an assistant manager. They found out about my record and they fired me. I started driving a bus from downtown Houston out to the airport. Eventually, they wanted to make me a supervisor. They found out about my record and they fired me. I then went to work for a large grocery chain called Wine Gardens in Houston, doing night stocking midnight to 8. I was a clean-cut person, well-dressed, and management thought this guy would make good management material, so they made me an assistant manager on one of their largest stores. Eventually, they wanted to put me into a management training program. They found out about my record and they fired me. I think at that point in my life, I realized I couldn't hide what I did. So if I could train federal law enforcement officers, why couldn't I train corporations, businesses, and consumers as well on how to protect themselves, spot crime, and to help prevent a great deal of crime? So I've started to do that. And for 45 years now, that's what I've done. I've conducted more than 3,000 seminars around the world during my career. I, of course, have worked with the FBI now for consistently for 45 years, 40 years past my obligation to do so. I've been married to my one and only wife for 45 years. I have 3 sons. My oldest boy is an FBI agent. He's a unit chief of the Crisis Negotiations Unit of the FBI. He's celebrating 15 years in the Bureau. I have 6 grandchildren as well, and the 7th on the way. A lot of people say, what changed your life? And it would be very easy to say that I was born again, I saw the light, prison rehabilitated me. I don't think I was any different the person who went into prison than the person that came out of prison. But I met my wife. I didn't have a dime to my name. When I told her who I really was, she believed in me. She trusted me. When I eventually asked her to marry me against the wishes of her parents, she did. And she changed my life. She and she alone. She gave me a beautiful family. She gave me a life. She trusted in me and believed in me, and I am where I am today because of my wife. Unfortunately, whenever your life is told in a story, people exaggerate the book that was written about me, then movie takes it to another level, then Broadway changes a lot of information in the book. And even though there are disclaimers in the book, there are a lot of stories that have been told. I hope that in the end, people remember me not as a con man or a guy who did all of those things in the movie, but I hope that people remember that I spent 45 years of my life trying to correct the mistakes that I had made and trying to do the right thing. And I'm here with you tonight to help that I can answer some questions and help your audience deal with some of the threats that all of us have to deal with our family, our children, and in our job as well. So thank you for having me and giving me that opportunity to do so. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight.
Thank you so much. Your story never gets old to me, and we are going to come back to talking about your family towards the end as we wrap up the topics that we're going to be discussing in your book. Tonight, the book that we're going to talk about tonight, Your Scam Me If You Can, we're going to talk about the technical aspects of it. And I just wanted to say that there's so much more to this book, not just technical. So that's why we'd want to encourage people to read everything in it. But because it's a technology training program that we have, I wanted to focus on that. And there's so much that we can dig into. The first thing is people often think of scammers and identity thieves. They focus mainly on senior citizens. Can you tell us what groups are scammed the most?
Yeah, that's not the case. You know, I wrote Scam Me If You Can. I was commissioned to write it by AARP. I've worked with them over the past 5 years in trying to protect their members, their 38 million members, from being victimized. When I wrote that book, they asked me to look at all scams, scams against young people, scams against seniors, Bitcoin scams, cryptocurrency scams, investment scams. And when I finished writing the book, and most of my books, as you know, that I've written are books against crimes against the government, crimes against businesses, financial institutions, corporations. So it was a little different for me to write a consumer-related book. And I was surprised at the end of the book that I realized that millennials were scammed more often than seniors, but seniors lose more money because basically they have more money.
Right. So modern technologies have given us so many conveniences in the past few decades. Have any advances in technology made it more difficult to scam people, or have the scams just evolved?
Made it 4,000 times easier to do what I did 50 years ago. Technology breeds crime. It always has. It always will. So, you know, in the old days, you had a con man or a con woman. It stood for confidence person. They gained your confidence. And yes, they were well dressed. They were well spoken, and they earned over your trust and confidence. Today, those days are gone. Today, you're dealing with someone who is sitting in their apartment with a cup of coffee in their pajamas on a laptop, thousands of miles away in Russia, in India, even down in Jamaica. And they're stealing millions of dollars. They will never see you and you will never see them. So there is absolutely no emotion involved. And consequently, they will take you for every penny you have. And that's how technology has changed a lot of the things we see today.
Mhm. So I would imagine also social media has made it so easy for people to overshare, and we overshare with the world. So how difficult is it to steal someone's identity from our social media posts?
Well, there are a couple of things about social media. I should point out that I'm not on any social media whatsoever, not on LinkedIn or Twitter or any other type of social media. I do personally believe, maybe not in my lifetime, but we will wake up one day and realize that that was probably a very bad experiment. The fact is that if you tell me on Facebook where you were born and your date of birth, that's 98% of me stealing your identity. Those are just simple keys that bring me to other keys, because we live in a way too much information world. We tell everybody everything. And if I take just a minute to show you, over the last couple of years, I've dealt a great deal with these phishing emails. And over the years of dealing with phishing emails, you were able to spot poor grammar, poor spelling. You could see where it came from. They're getting so sophisticated due to social media. So one of the emails that came across my desk recently was from the CEO to the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer, of ironically a technology company with 4,000 employees in Southern California. And the email simply said, "Good morning, Jeff. Wanted to thank you and your wife, Helen, for a wonderful dinner at your home last night. My wife, Susan, and I truly enjoyed your company. As I mentioned to you over dinner, I'm traveling to Nashville, Tennessee this week to attend a conference. I will be out of the office till next Monday. I forgot to mention to you to dinner that I need you to wire these funds out this morning. I promised them they would have them by 10 a.m. Here's the wiring instructions, signed Robert." They're going to social media because there's a picture of the CEO and his wife and family. There's a picture of the Chief Financial Officer's wife and their family. He mentioned 2 months earlier when he registered to attend that conference that he was going to that conference in Nashville, Tennessee. So actually they're using social media in real time to send out emails that are basically just a few hours old, that people truly believe this has to be real because it just happened a few hours ago. So social media is used by many people for many reasons, but we live in a way too much information world. And if you don't do anything, at least do not tell people where you were born and your date of birth. Otherwise, you're giving them a great deal of the security questions they need to do a lot of harm.
Okay. So since your book came out in 2019, we've gone through some significant changes with the pandemic. Many of us have changed almost overnight to using our phones and online ordering, everything from dining out to restaurants, groceries, household items. How has the pandemic affected scams in the past year? And have we put ourselves more at risk now because we're using our devices for everyday tasks?
Absolutely. We have seen a 350% increase in scams during the pandemic, a 400% increase in cybercrime during the pandemic. We have had more breaches in 2020 than we've had in all the breaches together since 2015. You have a lot of people sitting at home, staring in front of their computer. They're already fearful because of the pandemic. And there are all of these things coming up that you can get vaccines and pay a fee and jump ahead of the line. You can buy things that'll help you with the vaccine. There are things they're selling online. Always remember that scam artists follow the headlines. Whatever in the headlines, the next day the scam is perpetrated based on whatever they read in those headlines. So it's no surprise that they took advantage of the pandemic And they'll probably continue to take advantage, as we're going to see a lot of money enter the marketplace in the next couple of years, trillions of dollars, and scam artists will be in there trying to get every penny they can get as long as there's a way to get it.
Okay. So let's now talk about debit cards and credit cards. I know you don't like debit cards. Can you tell us the dangers of using your debit card and why your credit card is a safer alternative?
Yeah, I've written a lot about this over the many years in many of my books as well, in debit versus credit. I don't own a debit card. I have 3 grown sons. They're married and have children. They don't own a debit card. I asked myself a simple question many years ago: what is the safest form of payment in the United States? And the answer is credit card. Not credit debit card, credit card, Visa, MasterCard, American Express, Discover card. Every day of my life, I spend the credit card company's money. I don't spend my money. My money is never at risk because nobody knows where my money is. I go to the grocery store, I use my credit card. I go to the dry cleaner, I use my credit card. I get on the plane, I use my credit card. And I will do everything in my power to make sure no one gets my number. But if they do, and they charge $1 million on my credit card tomorrow, my liability is zero. I have zero liability. I love to shop online, but if I buy an expensive camera and it arrives broken, I go back to my credit card company. If they refuse to give me a refund or refuse to pay for the camera, if I go to a fictitious site and they never send the merchandise, I can go back to my credit card company. In every breach where we have a post-investigation after the breach, Target, Home Depot, you name it, consumer simply says, I was in the store, but I used my Visa card, and 2 days later, the bank canceled it, and 3 days later, FedEx delivered me a new card. The debit card person says, no, they got into my checking account, stole $3,000 out of my account. It took about 3 months for them to work it out, investigate, and get my money back. It's very simple. If you got your statement tomorrow and it was $4,000 in airline tickets, you'd call the credit card company and say, I didn't charge these. And they would tell you to delete that from the bill and pay your balance. But if they had a debit card and took the $4,000 out of your bank account, then you have to tell the bank it wasn't you. They've already taken your money. You have to convince the bank it wasn't you. They have to go through due diligence and investigation to prove it wasn't you. When you use your debit card, and you could use it 20 times a day for the next 20 years, you will not raise your credit score by that much. When you use your credit card and you pay the minimum due or you pay the full amount, your credit score goes up and you build up your credit. And credit today is very important. It's not like it was 30 years ago. Do I get the house? Do I get the car? Everything is based on your credit today. If you apply for a job, they check your credit. If you apply for auto insurance, they check your credit. Apply for mortgage, they check your credit. Everything is based on your credit. So it's good to keep your credit in good standing. Now, people always say to me, how do you get money when you travel? I ask my bank strictly for an ATM card, not an ATM debit card, just an ATM card. Then I can get money anywhere in the world when I travel, but I'm protected by the same laws that protect my credit card. If I have an ATM debit card, I would drop the debit side down to $1. And for those young people who like those financial services like Venmo, etc., I would suggest that you back that with a credit card. Do not back that with a debit card.
That's a great point right there. Okay, so knowing that debit cards are as dangerous as they could be as a form of payment, why do banks still encourage people to use them?
Well, because banks make money off of debit cards just as they do credit cards. Some people, especially young people, find it very, very convenient to use those cards. And to be honest, unfortunately, there are a lot of people who are not good about handling their money, and they wouldn't be good if using a credit card because they probably might end up in debt. So for them, maybe a debit card's a better use because they spend their money, just the money they have in their account. So I think that banks and financial institutions years ago just saw that as another means to sell a service. And there are people who like debit cards. There are people who need to use a debit card. So they saw a need for it and they used it. I just strongly believe that when you use a credit card, you don't have to have any concerns and worry about whether it's something you're buying or somebody getting your card or a breach that might occur.
Okay. Many banks have indicated that we will see fewer and fewer in-person services, especially because of the pandemic. And there's more reliance now on using our devices for online banking. Yet most of the financial advisors that I've ever spoken to are mothers of financial advisors' sons. No one has ever said, go ahead and use the mobile app to do your banking. How do you feel about this push to start doing all of our banking online?
I don't do online banking personally. I don't do mobile banking. I have no problem with bill pay because in bill pay, it is the bank paying the bill and the liability is with the bank. So I don't have any problem with bill pay. I'm a little old fashioned. I still write a check to pay my mortgage or to pay a loan and things like that. So I don't get over paranoid about all these things, but I try to eliminate as many risks as I can eliminate, or my exposure and my liability as much as I can. I think that's the wave of the future, whether we like it or not. We're going to see things move to more mobile devices, our actual phones and cell phones, and we're going to see people do more banking that way. But there, of course, will be risks associated with it, as there are risks with every financial transaction.
Okay, so we're going to stay on online banking for a moment. Let's play what is safe and what is a risk. So you just said you trust the bill pay feature. So using the bill pay feature of your online bank account would be a safe
Would be fine.
bet. How about paying bills out of a company website, such as a department store, utility, a phone bill, using your bank routing number and your account info, and they pull it?
I don't like that. I've never done it. Now, sometimes I'm forced to do it. For example, sometimes with insurance companies, you're forced to give them your account number so that they can remove the money from your account every month to pay your insurance. Those things I can't control, but if I can control it, I prefer not to do that.
Okay. Paying bills using an app on your mobile device.
I don't like anything on my mobile device because there is risk associated with that. But again, I remind people there are risk with every transaction, every financial transaction. There's risk associated with it. And so it's just a question of how big is the risk? Is the risk large? Is it small? That's something that I don't feel comfortable with, but some people feel very comfortable with. So it's something that you should look into. Understand what your risk is. You know, we never ask the bank the simple question, if this happens, who's liable, me or you? What is my risk? How big is my risk if I use this service that you're providing? And look over those deposit agreements, et cetera, instead of just signing them without reading what is in the text of those agreements.
Okay, so I'm going to expect that tomorrow, a lot of Greenwich banks are going to get a lot of phone calls from patrons. How about making deposits where you take a photo of your check? And I know you talked about this years ago, and I'm wondering if the technology has changed.
Hasn't changed much. The problem you always have is, remember, I take a check that you sent me from the library, I put it on my phone and scan it, deposits in my account. I then turn around and go cash that check at a check cashing store or at another bank. So I can still use that check again. The bank may catch it, the bank may not catch it for several months. You may catch it in your reconciliation or when you reconcile your account. But again, there's a little risk associated with that. So the question is, who has the risk, the bank or you in those scenarios? So I know my wife owns a few clothing stores. She has had an employee that she's paid. The employee took it, scanned it on their phone and then deposited it. And then a month later took the check and cashed it. It was several months before my wife found out about it when they reconciled. But so that's the risk associated with that.
I can't even imagine messing with the Abagnale family. So for those of us that are still writing checks, how has check writing changed since the 1970s? Because I know that banks have new changes to it.
Well, there's still about 39 billion checks written every year in the United States. What's kind of interesting to me is that we start to see check forgery coming back now, altered checks coming back, and we start to see more and more companies starting to resort back to writing checks. As you know, there's been a lot of problems with wire transfers and people stealing money through wire transfers. So we still have major companies that do large settlements still write checks. And as someone asked me more than 30 years ago in an interview, when will we see the paperless society? My answer then is my answer today: when you see the paperless toilet, no time soon. So I think checks are going to be with us for quite a while. As a matter of fact, I expect checks, especially in the business world, probably to continue to stay steady or even grow a little bit.
Okay. That's not exactly what I thought you were going to answer. So, okay. So you said it's 4,000 times easier to forge and scam people since you were doing it in the 1970s. If it's so easy to create a document using accessible CEO, CFO signatures and company logos and wiring information just by calling them, do you feel that companies are doing anything near enough to help protect us and their company and their customers to prevent fraud?
If they're proactive, 20 years ago, I designed ADP's check. They still use that check today. I designed Paycheck's payroll check. Millions of people get that paycheck. I designed a check for Safe Checks that does most of the bank's cashier's checks and escrow account checks. Never once has the check been counterfeited or forged in the 30 years the company has used the check. So yes, you can build security into technology. You can build good security into paper and plastic. But if you don't do it, then likely someone's going to be a victim. So you have to be proactive, not reactive. You see, we develop a lot of technology in this country without ever vetting the technology, without ever asking the simple question, how would someone use this technology against us? So look at the devices in your home. You have a device you can talk to, you ask it what time of day it is, what's on TV tonight, order me this from Amazon. You can flip that and I can hear everything you say in your house. You have cameras around your house on the outside because when you go away, you like to look on your iPhone, see what your property is doing. God forbid you have those cameras in your house, because I can flip that and then see everything that goes on in your house. Because we're building this technology and we're only concerned about return on investment, marketing people, how quick can I get it out, without vetting that technology. And that's why today I work with a number of technology companies. And as one CEO says, we play chess with Frank for 20 years. We develop something, we give it to Frank, he finds a way to beat it. So we come back and fix it. Then we go back to Frank, he finds another way around it. We go back and fix it until Frank tells us that it is pretty secure. There is absolutely nothing that's 100% secure. If you believe you have a foolproof system, then you have failed to take into consideration the creativity of fools. But I can make something so difficult that it would be like asking you to move the Empire State Building 2 blocks in 2 days. And that's what we try to accomplish. But we have to get better at building security into paper, plastic, security, technology, etc.
So you always have to be at least 2 steps ahead of the potential crime that will follow.
Always, and you have to go back. As I tell technology companies, you can't just say, oh, this is great now, and put it out and then forget about it. You have to go back in 12 months, say, oh, what else has come up, or how would someone else manipulate this? You have to constantly go back and look at it.
Okay. So I know you don't like passwords. Passwords are still in all sorts of services that we all use. They're used regularly. What are the biggest password mistakes that we make?
Well, first of all, yes, I've written for years that passwords are for tree houses. Mm-hmm. They were invented in 1964 when I was 16 years old, before I'd done any of the things I did. And today at 73, we are still using passwords. 63% of network intrusions are compromised passwords. 81% of weak breaches are from passwords. We have got to get rid of passwords. And today we are starting to see new technologies come to the marketplace. Some of your audience may have seen an ad where Serena Williams is running through a marketplace. She's in her jogging outfit. She only has her cell phone. She sees a necklace she wants to buy at the marketplace. So she goes over to a Chase ATM. She takes her phone out, presses the bank's app. She gets her money, no card, no password. These technologies are more and more coming to light. I think in the next 2 or 3 years, we'll see passwords go away. The company I advise in that technology is called Trusona, Trusona, stands for the true persona of the individual. When you use that technology, you don't need to have an app. You just have the technology, it's in your phone. And if I were to call the bank's call center, they identify me immediately by my phone. They don't ask me security questions. What's your mother's maiden name? What's your date of birth? What's your social security number? Which means that they don't have the answer to those questions, which eliminates that. If you take the top 5 largest banks in the United States, and we just take one of those 5, they spend on average of $100 million a year in their call center just resetting passwords. So if we could eliminate passwords, we eliminate a huge amount of breaches and problems. We save a tremendous amount of money in doing so. And so I think we're on the road to that. And I could sit here and talk about that technology, but if you go to the websites like Trusona, which is backed by Microsoft, if you go to that website, you will see the little 2-minute videos of using it at an ATM, using it at a call center, and how that device works.
Okay, so that was my next question about Trusona, because you've been talking about them for a number of years. So is that more like a smartphone authentication? What exactly, like, can you explain a little bit more about that technology?
It is exactly kind of like that, but it is much more secure. So for example, once you register, you go to a URL and you register your phone, that phone then is registered forever. So if I was walking out of a department store and they were verifying a purchase I made, they would simply go to your phone and you would click yes, and that would be all there is to it. They've authenticated you by your phone. If I called the call center, they authenticated me by the phone. And again, they do a great job at Trusona of doing a Q&A where every possible question you can imagine has been asked and they've answered it. And those videos are very simply instructive about how it works. But again, whenever you introduce a new technology, like doing away with passwords, you have people who get very skeptical and say, oh, is it really safe? Or I'm very comfortable doing this, I don't want to change. So what I recommended to the company is what those who use Trusona, you should always, for the next few years, leave the option to say, do you want to sign in with your password or do you want to sign in with no password? And I think more and more people get used to using sign-ins with no password and know that it's safe. That technology will take off.
Interesting. Okay, so I had thought Trusona was really for businesses, but it sounds like this is for individuals as well.
Absolutely. For consumers, so they can go to the ATM, they don't need to have a password, they don't need to have a card. If they call the bank's call center or they call whoever they're calling to get information, they will know and authenticate who they are by their device. And that's the wave of the future, and that's the way it's going to be. So this is just working technology to the most common way that people can authenticate themselves. I will point out to you that in my 45 years of conducting over 3,000 seminars, I live on a very simple philosophy. That's prevention, verification, and education. Prevention, because once you lose your money, you'll never get your money back. We already have more than $110 billion in outstanding court restitution that's outstanding. 91% has been uncollectible. And verification, because anything today can be replicated, duplicated, copied, counterfeited. So you have to verify everything before you part with your money or you part with information. You need to take a little time. You basically have to be a little smarter consumer today, a little smarter business person today than you did 20 years ago. And of course, finally, education, and that's what you're doing tonight. Education is the most powerful tool to fighting crime. If you can explain to people how a scam works and they understand it, they will not fall for that scam. But education is extremely important, and we need to do a much better job in educating people to what the risks are outside.
Okay, so this is probably going to fall right into what you're talking about. Stranger danger was a common term that we used to teach kids to stay away from people we don't know. But now we're talking about stranger danger, and it's not just for kids. Can you tell us how we can apply stranger danger to technology?
This is interesting to me because, you know, back in the 1970s, before anybody knew who I was, there was no book or anything about me. I did a number of public service ads for the Department of Justice. And those service ads were 30 seconds long. At the end, they were given to police departments so they could put their logo up and say, this public service message brought to you by the Greenwich Police Department. And basically, it was about protecting your checkbook and protecting your information, protecting your credit cards. In the 1980s, I was on millions of bank statements, stuffers that banks sent out with tips about protecting your checkbook, protecting your credit cards, your information. And today, no one is doing that. There's very little outsource of education. ARP does an amazing job of reaching out to their members, but banks do a horrible job of educating their customers. Even banks that I put on programs for, yesterday I did one for the Bank of Marin in California, but that was for their corporate customers. Today, very few banks do anything to help educate their consumers. So I was very surprised last year when a Canadian bank in Canada asked me if I would create 4 videos of the most common scams, the grandparent scams, the sweepstakes scam, the IRS scam, etc. And I created those 3-minute videos that they then put up on their site at their bank, mainly to educate their bank customers who were, in their case, more seniors and people who had money to lose. And I put those PSAs or public service announcements on my website at abagnale.com. I don't sell anything on my website. It's just simply an informational site, but I put that up there and you can watch those on my website on the homepage. But I think that was great that that bank did that. They brought great value to their customers, and I would like to see more banks and more institutions do that. And that's what you're doing tonight. And that's what's great, that the Greenwich Library takes the time and the effort to help educate their customers and the members of their library and their community.
Thank you. So in the last month, I've noticed in particular that phishing texts appear to be on the rise, and they really, really look legit. Amazon sends me text saying, congratulations, you won something, and I think I didn't apply for anything. Is there anything that we can do to limit the phishing texts that we're receiving and the emails that we receive?
It could be done by the phone companies, just like we've put a huge dent in robocalls because of the participation of phone companies like AT&T and Verizon, most of the major companies, who now alert you that this is probably a scam caller calling your phone. But as criminals always switch, so when they realized that was happening, they moved to robotext. And now they're sending out text messages to people as well. So I hope that the phone companies realize that's a problem and start to realize do something about that. But I would be very careful answering any text that comes to you, no matter who they say it's from. If it's asking you to verify something, give them some information, and you don't really know who's on the other end of that device.
So really, we're at a point where we just have to assume trust no one.
I mean, we have to verify, and that's anything. You know, the simplest thing in the world to do is alternate caller ID. I can make the caller ID say Greenwich Police Department, Connecticut State Police, FBI, IRS, Medicare. Just because it says that doesn't mean that's the caller who's calling. So you have to be a little smarter when you pick up that phone, and you can listen to what they have to say, but the minute they start asking you for information or start asking you for money, that's the time you need to hang up and verify who actually was calling you, if in fact that was real or not real.
Okay, so that brings us right into, in all scam situations, you say there are 2 red flags. What are the 2 red flags everybody should be aware of?
That was an eye opener for me, because when I finished this 400-page book of all these scams, I simply said to myself, you know what? No matter how sophisticated the scam was, no matter how amateur the scam was, there were always these persistent 2 red flags. At some point, I'm going to ask you for money, but you have to give me this money immediately. So I ask you for a bank routing number, an account number. I ask you for a credit card number. I actually tell you to stay on the phone with me and go down to Walmart and get a Green Dot card and then read me the number on the back of that card. It has to be immediately. So if I say I'm from the police department and there's an outstanding warrant, you need to pay it. And I say to you, well, I'm a block from the police department, I'll come down and pay it right now. No, no, no. You have to pay it this minute. Give me a bank account number. That's the red flag. And the second red flag is, even in a romance scam that may go on for a year, I have a wonderful relationship with this person, though I never actually met them. We talk on the phone, we talk through email. And then one day I say, hey, Robert, how come you don't come visit me if you just live 2 states away? Well, you know, Helen, I'd like to, but I have to have this operation and it's $30,000 and I don't have the money. And if I don't have the money, you know, I probably may pass away. Oh, well, I could help you. That's where there's money comes up or information comes up. What's your social security number? What's your date of birth? Where do you bank? If you don't know who's on the other end of that device, whether it's an email, whether it's a telephone, whether it's a text, you need to verify who that is before you part with any information or you part with any money.
Okay, so it's the pressure sale. We need it right away and we want your money.
Right. And we want information. Give me some information that's a social security number, date of birth, bank account number, etc.
Okay. So in a 2019 interview, you said you weren't a fan of cryptocurrency because it was still a rather new technology. So we're a few years later. Has your opinion of cryptocurrency changed at all?
No, not much, because first of all, I have a problem with cryptocurrency because it's a huge risk. Now, there's a lot of money to be made, so people take those risks sometimes, but it's not a regulated currency. And of course, I always have a problem with any of things like Bitcoin or cryptocurrency as a way of moving money around for crime. And that goes to narcotics and drug trafficking and child pornography and many other things. And because it's untraceable money, it just gives more assets to a criminal to be able to do something with that money and hide that money. So I think there will come a day when we have more regulations around Bitcoins and cryptocurrency. We make it a little safer for people to invest in it. But until that time comes, I'm just a little leery about those technologies.
Okay, so Frank Abagnale is leery, we will be as well. Now, in your book, you talked about blockchain as a future security technology. Can you tell us a little bit more about blockchain technology?
Yeah, blockchain is a growing technology. I think it's a good technology. It's a new technology. So again, we have to vet it considerably over the next few years. But I think that blockchain will be a way of keeping records and for land and property, virtual records on people's property. It'll be great for insurance companies to keep records, financial institutions. But there are issues. Remember, the blockchain is just as good as the information I put in it. So if I put false information in it, then that false information is there forever. And we believe it to be accurate. We would have problems, for example, right now with blockchain where we have witness protection programs because that wouldn't work once it was in the blockchain. And there are things about people's maybe sexual orientation or something of social issues. So these are things like any technology that have to be worked out. They will be worked out. But I think that blockchain is absolutely in the future and will be the way that we maintain and keep records. And it will be a good thing, a positive thing.
So if I understand correctly, once the information goes in, it can't be altered?
Can't be changed or altered.
Huh,
so it's only as good as the information you put in it.
Okay, and that the information being put in is going to be coming from humans?
From humans.
And we are flawed and make mistakes.
Right. Every time there's a human involvement, there's a risk associated with it. Every breach in the United States, every breach has been caused because somebody in that company did something they weren't supposed to do, or somebody in that company failed to do something they were supposed to do. Hackers really don't cause breaches. Hackers just look for open doors. And there are open doors and opportunities everywhere, especially when you don't have the proper technology in place to protect your business or your company. So in the case of Equifax, they didn't update their system. They didn't install their security patches from Microsoft. So the hackers got in, they sat there for several months, decided what to steal, and in the end, stole 145 million credit records and more than 12 million driver's licenses. So we have to do a much better job of educating our employees. And as I mentioned earlier, we have to do a better job of putting security first, because if you think it can't happen to you, or it may not happen to you, that's the person who is most likely going to happen to.
Now, I had read somewhere, and it was a while ago, and I don't know if it was you or somebody else that said it, but any company that says we've never been hacked probably has had a breach somewhere and they just don't know it yet. Is that true?
Yeah, there are only two types of companies: the companies that have never been hacked and the companies that will be hacked. So that's
Okay.
that's the way it is.
Okay. What are you excited about for the future of technology?
I think there are a lot of great things with technology. I think as we move into AI and those types of technologies and blockchain technologies, but I just hope that we go in and look at these things in a proactive way. We vet these things before we put them out in the marketplace instead of worrying about how much money we can make and how fast we can make it. That we put technologies out there that work and we vet the technologies so we know which ones are good and which are not, and that we constantly keep up with those technologies. You know, you have to be concerned. For example, right now, they have the ability to shut someone's pacemaker off. All you have to do is walk by them on the street, you never have to even touch them. We need to do something about that. We know that the average car has more than 240 computer components in it, but we know that you can pull over a car today with technology. You can lock the car doors, you can turn on the airbag, you can shut the motor off. So the question is, those are restricted by distance, usually around 35 feet with today's technology. But 5 years from now, is that 350 feet, 35 miles, 3,500 miles? So we have to be concerned about those types of technologies and what we're doing to keep those technologies safe.
Okay. Um, so I'm going to wrap my questions on a personal note. Your book, Catch Me If You Can, was hugely popular. It led to the movie with Leonardo DiCaprio and Tom Hanks. And I know that you had a little cameo role in that. Even a Tony Award winning Broadway play. Has anybody approached you about a movie or a program documenting your tremendous success, both personally with your family, because you speak of them often, as well as helping individuals and the businesses, because you've had decades of doing wonderful things for people. And I feel like, isn't a sequel somewhere?
No, you know, it's unfortunate because I believe that just the opposite. There are people always judging me. There are people always attacking me. And they're talking about things I did 50 years ago and whether they were true or not true or how accurate. I didn't write the book. Stan Redding wrote the book. He did it based on an article he wrote about me for the Houston Chronicle back in 1977. And then he wrote it into a book. He did put a disclaimer in there. He said it wasn't a documentary. It wasn't simply a story. But then Hollywood took it and they made it into a bigger story, and Broadway made it into another story with different things. You know, the truth is this. I just turned 73 on April 27th. And basically, I look back on my life and I say to myself, with all honesty and sincerity, had I been a little bit more upfront with that grocery store in Houston, Texas, so many years ago, and told them that I had a criminal record and who I was, but that I really wanted to work for them and I would do a good job. And if they had said, you know what, we'll give you a chance, and I took that chance, I would have lived a much happier life had I just been the manager of that store, met my wife, of course, had my 3 sons, but lived in a small house, lived a much more quieter life. Fame is not anything I would wish on anybody. There are always people who are going to judge you no matter how good you do. And when people write about me today, they never write about the things that you were so kind to talk about. They only go back to the world's greatest con man or things I did when in my youth, and debate those things back and forth. And it's a horrible way to live, and I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. I just try to turn a bad thing into a good thing, and I try to help people, and I know in my heart I'm doing the right thing every day. And most important to me of all the things, I only want to be remembered as most men should be remembered, as that I was a good husband, I was a good father, and that I was a daddy to my children. That's the only thing that's really important to me.
And I just love that you always talk about your family that way. Um, and I think it is unfortunate because I can't even imagine calling you a con man, because you were what, 16, and it was only a couple of years that you did that, and now you've got these decades of doing something amazing. So to me, you're a rock star and a hero for helping educate all of us, and you've been, crime fighting for all of these years. So I thank you for that. so
I
much.
appreciate that. And I will continue to do that, as I tell people, as long as I can get up in the morning and get on an airplane or sit in front of a computer screen and talk so that people understand me and give them accurate information. I will do that as long as I can.
Well, I hope you do, because your book, Scam Me If You Can, again, it's available at Diane's Books in Greenwich, was amazing and life-changing. I've preached it to everybody that will listen to me talk about it. So we have, let me see, we've got 10 minutes left. And if you'd like, we have some questions from our attendees. Question: in the book, the real estate section is 24 pages. Many I have known have been scammed in real estate opportunities, and some with notary fraud, attorneys with conflict of interest, etc. Would you expand on this?
Yeah, there's a lot of real estate scams out there. Now, I get a lot of emails that people ask me, do I need to buy these special programs that protect your deed? You know, if you have bought your house and you live in a house that you've had title searches done and you have title insurance and it's been done through a bank and a mortgage company, it's pretty safe. If you bought a house from somebody else and there wasn't involved with the actual closing and title insurance and transfers of deeds and stuff, I'd be a little concerned about that. But yes, there are, again, people out always trying to scam people. Whether they're professional people, whether they're criminals, there are always going to be people trying to manipulate information, manipulate people. So again, you want to make sure you have everything accurate. So if you buy a house, you want to make sure your papers are in order. You want to go to a legitimate attorney, make sure they review it. Again, just be proactive about those things, be a little smarter about those things, because yes, in every fork of life, whether it's real estate or anything else, there are all kinds of scams that are percolating underneath those things.
Okay. We have another question. What is the most effective computer scam used today?
The most one that people fall for the most is that you start to see your screen flutter a little bit, and then up a message comes supposedly from Microsoft that you have a problem with your computer or that your computer has been hacked, and you could call this 800 number. You call that number and they tell you they can fix it, and either they ask you to take over your computer or they ask you to pay them a fee to fix it. And even if the fee is small, they just want your credit card information, and you give them that information over the phone, and then that's all they need to get from you. And then they're going to use your credit card and to max your credit card out. So if you have a problem with your computer or your stuff, something's not working properly, make sure you go to someone reputable. There are a lot of reputable companies that have techs that come out to your house and be able to look at your computer and see if there's any problem or eliminate any malware that might be on your computer. But don't fall for anybody popping up on the screen and telling you to pay them money right now, or that you have a problem right at this moment, you need to fix it. Those are just scams.
Those are the two red flags again.
Yes.
So, okay. How well protected is the US passport?
The passport is one of the most secure documents in the world. There is a tremendous amount of technology in the passport that people don't know about. So when you go through the passport terminal with the customs officer and they swipe your passport through the machine, it's not just reading the number at the bottom of the machine. There is technology built into those passports that are not made public. So I've always felt that if all the documents that are out in the marketplace today, the passport is probably the most secure document. Now, there are people who replicate them and they can make them look exactly the same, but they do not have the technology the government puts in it. Most of those people get caught trying to go through or in and out of the country. They can show it to someone for ID and be very impressive, but when they try to use it for that purpose, they will get caught.
Okay. Can you speak about Apple Pay and PayPal's security?
They're like anything. They have a great deal of security built in those technologies. They have vetted those technologies. I don't really have any problem with those. Those are just a matter of public's convenience and what people like to use and what they're comfortable using. But they have a tremendous amount of technology and encryption and all of the things necessary to keep it safe. Again, they understand that there's no foolproof system. They understand there's people who will manipulate that system. And that happens all the time. So as long as they're staying on top of it, they're going back and fixing it when they have a problem, they recognize when they have a problem. I think those well-established technologies and well-established companies are probably, if you can feel pretty safe using.
Okay, well, that's great to know. Does using VPN protect you from the risks of online transactions?
Yeah, VPN is very good, and there are a lot of good companies out there. I'd vet those companies so you before you use one of them, and make sure you use the most popular ones that are out there, and that you look into them. But yes, that it does protect you.
Okay, what's the best way to vet some of these companies that you're talking about?
You know, we have so much you can do on your computer because you can Google so many things, and you can research people's comments, and you can research what people have to say and what studies have been done about those technologies and what experts say are good and bad. So it just takes a little time to do it. But if you're trying to protect your money and your information, you know, you want to take a few minutes to do that. So you can do that, or you can go to a trusted advisor that has already vetted those companies, or maybe your financial institution or someone like that who's already looked into those things and has vetted those technologies.
Okay. We have a Trusona question. What happens if your phone is stolen?
Okay, so remember that you have to have either a 6-digit code to get into your phone, or you have to have your facial recognition to get into your phone. So if I don't have that, I can't use the phone. So if I leave my phone somewhere or someone steals my phone, then it's not going to work. So it looks at those 2 pieces of authentication to begin with, and then the final step of authentication being Trusona.
Okay, so it's going to be important for people using smartphones that they want to make sure it's password protected.
Right.
Right. Okay. Interesting question. What happens if my medical files get hacked?
Well, think how much information is in your medical files. You know, what's always used to worry me is, you know, you go into a lot of doctors' offices and you notice these files are just in file cabinets, and many times they're unlocked. And I always thought if I was doing this, I would find the cleaning crew that cleans up there, and I'd say to them, hey, go up there and pull out some of these files and take a picture. Don't steal anything. Don't touch anything. I'm looking for social security numbers, dates of birth, and that information. It would be so easy to do. And of course, people then can turn around and use that information and sell it, or they can actually use your insurance because they have the information to claim they're you and get medical care under your name. We're very concerned about medical files, and we're also concerned that most hospitals don't do a very good job of keeping that information secure. So we're trying to encourage hospitals to do a much better job of keeping those electronic files secure.
And so I guess it would be really important then that when we get our statements from insurance companies, that we're really scrutinizing that information.
Absolutely. And while we're on statements, always remember this. It's very important that you reconcile. So when you open your statement, you need to look at it. And even today, we don't send you the canceled checks, but we send you an image of that check. You need to look at those images because the law says you have 30 days from receipt of your bank statement to notify your bank of any discrepancy in your account. So if I have a wealth management account with $200,000 in it, and I say to myself, well, I don't need to check it. I only write a couple of checks off of it a month, totaling maybe $4,000. I don't need to even open the envelope. And then 6 months later, you find out you're short in your account and you go back 2 months in a bank statement and there's a forged check. That's too late to go to the bank and recover your money. So it's very important that you at least look at your bank statement and reconcile your bank statements. Like I used to tell doctors and dentists, you just can't rely on your bookkeeper. There has to be a segregation of duties. So I would have my bank statement mailed to my home. I would open it, look at it, make sure everything is in it correct, the balance, the checks that were written, and then give it to my bookkeeper to reconcile my accounts. So I've segregated those duties. And, you know, I always remind companies you have a moral obligation to keep your employees honest. That's why we have controls. That's why we have audits. And that's why we have best practices. So we do those things. So we never put someone in a position because there are always people in life who get desperate. They have a child who's sick. They're going through a divorce. They're losing their home. They're in a bankruptcy. and they might do something they normally wouldn't do. So if we have those controls in place, that tells that person, well, I can't do that because this has to go to Helen. Helen has to approve it. Then it goes over to Joan. Joan looks at it. Those are the purpose of controls and segregation of duties. But I believe that every company has a moral obligation to have those controls to keep their employees honest.
Frank, we are at the end of the hour and I could talk to you all evening. You are so informative and interesting and engaging. I appreciate all of the time that you've spent with us. I'm so sorry that we couldn't meet you in person this visit. Maybe we get to meet you at another point. Thank you so much for attending tonight.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Everybody remember, scan me if you can. Please, Diane's bookstore. We also have it in the library to borrow. You will not be sorry. I promise you, you will learn so much. Thank you to the Greenwich Library Board of Trustees again for allowing this program tonight. Thank you so much, Frank Abagnale, for being here.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody. Thank you for attending.